A billionaire CEO attends a charity concert out of duty, only to freeze when two little girls step on stage and sing a song that unravels his deepest secret. One haunting performance, a woman from his past, and a truth he never saw coming. What follows is a powerful story of love lost, second chances, and the fight to become a father when it matters most. Where are you watching from? Let me know, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Charles Denton didn't believe in charity, not in the sentimental sense. He believed in tax deductions, strategic philanthropy, and showing face at events where reputations were built more than lives were changed. So when he stood in the back of the Hilton ballroom that night, nursing a glass of untouched champagne, he was already calculating how long he needed to stay before his absence would be noticed. He didn't belong here. The music, the polite laughter, the crowd of socialites in tailored tuxedos and glittering gowns, it all felt like background noise to a man who had long ago traded emotion for efficiency. His suit was sharp, his posture straighter than a steel beam, and his expression unreadable. Charles had built an empire through discipline and distance. Feelings were for amateurs. He scanned the room, indifferent, just waiting for the right moment to disappear. Then the host stepped up to the microphone. "Tonight, we have a very special performance," she said, her voice warm and theatrical. "Two young girls, just 6 years old, will be singing a song dedicated to children fighting heart disease." Charles barely registered the words. Children's performances were usually cute, maybe touching, but not enough to hold his attention. He turned slightly, ready to make his exit. But then the spotlight hit the stage. Two little girls stepped into the light, hand in hand, wearing white dresses with soft gold ribbons around their waists. Their brown hair curled gently at their shoulders, and the moment they looked into the audience, something inside Charles jolted. He stopped mid-step. His breath caught in his throat. Their eyes. He blinked. Something was wrong. No, not wrong. Familiar. Too familiar. He narrowed his gaze. The way one of the girls tilted her head, the soft dimple that appeared when the other smiled, it was like watching echoes of a face he hadn't seen in years. As the music began and they sang, their voices blended with a sweetness so pure it felt almost holy. But Charles couldn't hear the melody. Not really. All he could see were the shapes of their faces, the tilt of their chins, the way one tapped her foot slightly off beat. He did that. He'd done that since he was a boy. The ballroom faded. The air grew thick. His chest tightened. And then he saw her. Off to the side of the stage, nearly hidden in the wings, stood a woman in a navy blue dress, her posture taut, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying the world wouldn't collapse. Lena Carter. Charles's heart nearly stopped. She was older, thinner, her once honey-blonde hair now a shade darker, pulled back in a loose knot. But it was her. There was no doubt. The woman who had vanished from his life 6 years ago without so much as a goodbye. No letters, no calls, nothing, just gone. He'd searched for her, quietly for months. Then eventually, like he did with everything else, he buried the loss in his work, in success, in silence. But now, there she was, standing not 10 yards away. And those girls, those beautiful, haunting girls, weren't just singing. They were revealing a secret she'd kept from him for 6 years. He couldn't breathe. The applause thundered as the final note was sung. The crowd rose to its feet, teary-eyed and delighted. Charles didn't move. He didn't clap. His hands were shaking. When the girls bowed and skipped off stage, he barely noticed the people brushing past him to get a better look. His past had just walked onto a stage in matching white dresses and sung straight through the armor he'd spent a lifetime building, and he wasn't ready for any of it. Charles didn't remember leaving the ballroom. One moment he was surrounded by applause, the next he was outside, cool night air hitting his face like a slap. His mind was a storm, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with business or stress. He paced the sidewalk, his eyes fixed on the side exit of the building, waiting. He didn't know what he'd say, only that he had to see her. Had to look Lena Carter in the eye and ask her the one question that refused to stay silent. The door opened. There she was, guiding the two girls with a protective hand on each of their backs, her posture graceful but guarded. The girls chatted about cookies and glitter, completely unaware of the man whose entire world was unraveling just a few feet away. "Lena," Charles called softly, his voice rough with emotion. She froze. The girls skipped ahead, and for a moment, she didn't turn around. Then slowly, as if each second weighed 100 pounds, she faced him. Her eyes widened, her breath hitched. "Choice." He stepped forward, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning. "You left," he said, voice low. "6 years? Not a call, not a word, and now I see you with them." He didn't glance toward the girls. He couldn't. If he did, he'd lose control. Lena swallowed hard. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "Are they mine?" The words felt foreign, like he was speaking someone else's pain. She looked down. "Yes." Silence fell like a hammer between them. Charles closed his eyes for a moment, trying to breathe, trying to anchor himself in a reality that suddenly felt too small for everything rushing at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, not angrily, but raw, wounded. "Why would you keep them from me?" Lena looked up, and for the first time he saw it. Guilt, yes, but also exhaustion. The kind of weariness that didn't come from sleep deprivation, but from years of carrying the weight of doing it alone. "You were building an empire," she said softly. "You just closed your biggest acquisition. You were working 20-hour days. You told me there was no room for anything else." "I didn't mean you," he said, shaking his head. "I thought you did," she said, voice steady now. "I was scared. Scared to distract you. Scared to ruin what you were chasing. And I didn't know how to ask for space in your world." He looked away, jaw tight, trying to process a lifetime's worth of regrets in a matter of seconds. "One of them," she continued, her voice shifting, "Eliza, she's sick." That word cut through everything. "Sick?" he asked, alarmed. "A heart condition. Congenital. Manageable with surgery, but expensive. We've tried everything. Tonight, that performance, it was our last try. I needed the fundraiser to work." He stared at her. "You were raising money for her surgery by having them sing?" She nodded. "It was the only way I knew how. I didn't want to ask you. Not after all this time. Not with what we had, what we didn't have." Charles ran a hand down his face. The ache in his chest deepened. "Where are you staying?" "A friend's house," she said cautiously. "Not far." "I want to see them," he said. "Please." Lena hesitated, her eyes searching his, looking for truth, for stability. Maybe for something more fragile, intention. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, almost to herself. "But go slow. They don't know who you are." Charles nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "Then it's time they do." They walked together, side by side, down a quiet neighborhood street. The city lights faded behind them, replaced by the hush of crickets and distant sirens. The two girls walked ahead, their laughter bouncing through the night like a lullaby he didn't know he'd been longing to hear. Every step Charles took was heavier than the last. He could see their silhouettes, carefree and bright, and he realized he didn't even know their names. 6 years of missed birthdays, of first words, first steps, gone. A past he couldn't reclaim. But maybe, just maybe, he could earn a place in their future. They stopped outside a modest home with peeling paint and a garden that looked like it had been tended more by love than by money. Lena reached for the key, paused, and looked at him. "They're sweet," she said, "and smart. But they've never had a father. Not really." Charles swallowed hard. "They will now." And with that, she opened the door. The house smelled like cinnamon and something faintly floral, lavender maybe. It wasn't big or new or anything close to the sleek glass and marble spaces Charles Denton was used to. But the second he stepped over the threshold, it felt alive. There were shoes by the door, tiny ones with cartoon characters on the sides, crayon drawings taped to the walls. A dollhouse partially collapsed in the corner, mid-rescue mission from the looks of it. This wasn't a place designed by an architect, it was built by memories. The girls dropped their backpacks and jackets as they ran inside. Lena's voice followed them, gentle but firm. "Wash up, it's almost bedtime." Charles stood in the foyer, unsure of what to do with his hands, unsure of how to breathe. He didn't belong here. Not yet, maybe not ever, but his feet refused to move. Lena turned to him, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Come in. You're not a ghost." He stepped inside, slowly, taking in every small trace of a life he wasn't part of. A coffee mug with "World's Okayest Mom" printed on it, a grocery list on the fridge, a family of 3 stick figures drawn under a sun, the tallest one clearly a woman, no sign of him. Of course there wasn't. He'd been absent longer than they'd been alive. "They don't know your name," Lena said, watching him study the drawing. They know they have a father, but not who. He nodded, throat too tight to speak. Then came the sound of small footsteps down the hall, and both girls reappeared, now in pajamas, their hair damp from quick bedtime baths. One of them, the quieter one, clutched a stuffed owl to her chest. The other, the bolder of the two, walked right up to Charles with no hesitation and narrowed her eyes like a tiny detective. "You were at the concert," she declared. "I saw you looking at us." Charles crouched slowly so he could meet her gaze. "Yes, I was there." "You didn't clap," she said suspiciously. "I forgot," he admitted with a small smile. "You were both so good, I just forgot how to move." She looked him over for a long moment, then tilted her head. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Behind them, Lena froze, holding her breath. Charles looked at the girl, so confident, so curious, and answered carefully, "I'm hoping I can be your friend too." The girl considered that. "Well, okay, but you'll have to learn our secret handshake. And Eliza has to like you first." "Eliza?" he asked gently. The quieter twin stepped forward, holding her owl a little tighter. Her eyes were deep and still, eyes that watched instead of spoke. Charles looked into them and saw everything he had missed. Every night she cried from a fever, every birthday candle blown out without him. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just nodded. "Hi, Eliza, I'm Charles." She nodded back, shy but not afraid. Later, after a whirlwind of bedtime stories, giggles, and requests for water that Lena expertly deflected with a practiced look, Charles stood in the hallway outside their shared bedroom. He listened to the faint hum of lullabies from a nightlight speaker and the soft rustle of sheets. The house was quiet now, wrapped in that fragile calm that only came when children were finally asleep. Lena stood beside him, arms folded. Her eyes were tired but clear. "You did okay," she said. "I didn't say much," he replied. "You didn't need to." They walked to the small kitchen where she poured him a cup of herbal tea he didn't ask for. He took it anyway. The steam curled between them like something sacred. "When did you know Eliza was sick?" he asked, breaking the silence. Lena leaned against the counter, her eyes drifting to the floor. "About a year ago. She started getting tired after just a few minutes of running. Then the chest pain started. We went through 3 clinics before we found someone who took it seriously." He held the cup tighter. "What's the prognosis?" "She needs surgery," Lena said softly. "Soon. The kind that requires a specialist, a long recovery, and more money than I've ever had." "You should have told me." She looked up, her face unreadable. "I didn't think you'd want to know." Charles set the tea down, untouched. "I didn't stop caring. I just didn't know there was something to care about." Lena exhaled slowly. "I wasn't sure you'd come back. I wasn't sure you'd stay." He met her gaze. "I'm still not sure what I'm doing, but I know I can't walk away from them. I saw their faces. I can't unsee that." A long silence settled over the room. Finally, Lena said, "They're good girls. I can tell." She nodded once. "Go slow, Charles. They've only ever had one world. Don't turn it upside down too fast." He looked toward the hallway, where the soft hum of childhood dreams echoed behind a closed door. "I won't," he said quietly, "but I want to be part of it." And somewhere deep in that fragile, unspoken space between them, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe, the very first brick of a bridge that had waited 6 years to be built. Charles didn't sleep that night. He lay on the lumpy pull-out couch in Lena's guest room, staring at the cracked ceiling, the faint glow of a nightlight flickering from under the girl's door. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of old wood and the rhythmic hum of the heater. But his mind refused silence. He kept seeing their faces, Eliza's cautious eyes, Lucy's bold curiosity, and hearing the sound of their voices on that stage. He felt like a man caught between 2 lives, the one he built with steel and strategy, and the one he just stumbled into, built with bedtime stories and crayons. At dawn he rose, got dressed, and stepped outside to make a few phone calls. By 9 a.m., he had already spoken to 2 cardiologists, a hospital director, and his personal attorney. By noon, Eliza had a scheduled consultation with one of the top pediatric heart surgeons in the state. He didn't ask for permission. He simply made it happen. This was something he could control. And for once, he wanted to use that power for something that mattered. When he returned to the house, Lena stood in the kitchen, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, her hands covered in flour. Lucy was at the table drawing with a pink marker. Eliza sat nearby, coloring quietly, her owl tucked against her side. "I scheduled the consult," Charles said gently. "For tomorrow. We'll go together." Lena didn't answer at first. She stared at him, stunned, then slowly nodded. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick. "I don't even know how." "Don't," he cut in softly. "You've done more than I can imagine. It's my turn." The next morning, the drive to the hospital was heavy with unspoken fear. Eliza held Lena's hand in the back seat, her face pale, lips tight. Charles watched them through the mirror, fighting the urge to pull over, hold them both, and promise the world. But he knew better than to offer empty words. So instead, he drove, steady and focused, anchoring them in presence. At the hospital, Charles handled the paperwork, spoke with the surgeons, and made sure Eliza was treated like a VIP without her even knowing it. The staff adored her. She was quiet but brave, answering questions with a nod or a whisper, never complaining, even when her fingers trembled. When it came time for pre-op prep, her eyes darted toward her mother. Then to Charles. "Will you be here when I wake up?" she asked. Charles knelt beside her bed, placing a hand over her small one. "I'm not going anywhere." She stared at him, searching his face. Then she whispered, "Bring my owl." He smiled, and for the first time, she smiled back. Barely, but it was there. As she was wheeled away, Lena's composure cracked. She sank into the nearest chair and buried her face in her hands. Charles sat beside her, silent, his arm wrapping around her shoulders instinctively. This time, she didn't flinch or pull away. She leaned into him, letting the weight she'd carried alone for so long finally rest on someone else. The hours dragged. Charles tried to distract himself with emails, but couldn't concentrate. Every time the door opened, he jolted. Every step in the hallway felt like it might deliver joy or devastation. Finally, the surgeon entered, tired but smiling. "She did beautifully," he said. "No complications. She's resting now." Lena covered her mouth with both hands. Tears poured down her cheeks. Charles closed his eyes, the relief washing over him like a tide. He'd faced high-stakes deals, multi-million-dollar decisions, but none of them had felt like this. When they were finally allowed to see her, Eliza looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful. Lucy stood quietly at her sister's side, holding her hand, eyes wide with worry. Charles placed the stuffed owl beside Eliza's arm. "You stayed," she whispered. He leaned in. "Of course I did." Her eyelids fluttered shut again, the bear clutched tight. Later that night, Charles stayed behind while Lena took Lucy home for rest. The hospital room was dim, filled with the quiet hum of machines. Charles sat in the visitor's chair, elbows on his knees, watching Eliza breathe. He didn't hear the door open at first. Lucy padded in, holding a drawing. She crossed the room and handed it to him without a word. It showed 4 stick figures under a crooked sun, 1 tall, 3 small. "Mommy, Eliza, Lucy, Daddy," the labels said, each in a different crayon. Charles stared at it, throat tight. "I didn't want you to think I forgot," she said softly. "You helped her. That means you're staying, right?" He looked at her and for the first time said it out loud. "Yes, I'm staying." She smiled, the kind that broke open something in his chest. Then she climbed into the other chair, curled up with her knees tucked in, and closed her eyes, trusting him to keep watch. And Charles did. All night. Eliza was discharged from the hospital a week later, thinner than before, but glowing with life in her cheeks again. The nurses, who had grown attached to her gentle spirit, waved goodbye like they were sending off royalty. She clutched her owl close and insisted, no, declared, that she would ride home in Charles's car, not Lena's. "Yours doesn't smell like old crackers," she said bluntly to her mother, which made Lena roll her eyes and Charles laugh harder than he had in years. He helped her into the back seat with careful hands, adjusting her seatbelt like it was made of silk. Lena stood at the hospital entrance, watching the scene, something unreadable flickering across her face. This man who had vanished from her life now knew how to tuck their daughter in with gentle fingers, how to juggle medications and appointment cards, how to wait in silence and offer presents instead of promises. It didn't make sense, but it felt real. At home, the rhythm of life resumed, though altered. Mornings became a chorus of clinking dishes, Eliza's soft footsteps, and Lucy's endless monologues about everything from lizards to lunchboxes. Charles was there through it all, not as a guest, but as someone who now remembered which cup each girl preferred. Lucy's with the unicorn, Eliza's with the stars. He burned toast more than once, forgot how to fold fitted sheets, and found glitter in his shoes. But none of it bothered him. One morning, while folding laundry, Lena looked at him and asked, "Are you really planning to stay?" He didn't pause. "As long as you'll let me." She didn't answer right away, just handed him a towel and returned to matching socks. But that night, after the girls had gone to bed and the house had fallen into that familiar hush, she joined him on the porch. The air was cool, stars blinking overhead like they were eavesdropping. They sat in silence for a long time. "I spent so long preparing to do it all alone," she finally said, eyes focused on the dark horizon. "Told myself I didn't need anyone, that I was enough." "You were," he said gently. "You still are." She looked at him, caught off guard by the conviction in his voice. "I just want to be part of it now," he added. "I don't want to take over. I just want a seat at the table." Lena smiled faintly, almost sad. "I don't even know what that looks like." "Neither do I," he said, "but I'm willing to find out." That willingness became a foundation. There were awkward moments, of course, like when Eliza called him Charles for days before switching to Dad one morning, almost by accident, while asking for help with her shoes. Or when Lucy asked him if he would still love them, if they grew up and got boring. He promised he would, but also swore he'd still be around to dance like a fool in the kitchen if they ever needed a partner. The girls accepted him not all at once, but in layers. First through shared meals, then games, then quiet bedtime routines. One afternoon, Lucy dragged him to her school play. She had a single line about a tomato, but beamed with pride when she saw him in the front row, clapping like it was Broadway. That night, she gave him a drawing, their house with 4 stick figures, each holding hands under a crooked sun. "You can hang it next to your desk," she said, "so you don't forget." "I won't," he replied, his voice catching just a little. Eliza remained more reserved, but she watched, observed, and then, one night while Charles tucked her in, she whispered, "I'm glad you stayed." He kissed her forehead. "Me too." As the weeks passed, Charles began leaving more and more pieces of himself in the house. A toothbrush in the bathroom, his jacket on the back of a chair, his favorite mug started showing up in the dishwasher, nestled among the rainbow plastic cups. He wasn't a guest anymore. He was home. Then came Sunday afternoon. The living room was transformed into a restaurant by Lucy and Eliza, menus scribbled on napkins, cups filled with imaginary juice, invisible spaghetti served with flair. Charles sat dutifully at the pretend table, being overcharged for fake lemonade and serenaded with made-up jingles. Lena stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching them with a half-smile that slowly softened into something else, certainty. That evening, after the dishes had been put away and the giggles had faded into dreams, Charles found her standing at the kitchen window. "I never imagined we'd end up here," she said. "Neither did I. I thought it would just be me and the girls forever, and I made peace with that. I thought I had to." He stepped beside her, not touching, just close enough. "You didn't. You don't." She turned to him, emotion rising in her throat. "You really mean to stay?" "Yes," he said. "If you'll have me." And for the first time she reached for his hand, fingers lacing through his. Not urgently, not dramatically, but with the quiet surety of someone choosing hope again. That night, with the stars overhead and the house humming gently behind them, Charles knew it wasn't a second chance he'd been given. It was his first real one. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. "Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this heartfelt story. If you're still here, it means the journey of Charles, Lena, and their daughters touched something deep within you, just as it did for me." This story reminds us of something powerful. It's never too late to do the right thing. No matter how much time has passed, no matter the pain or the silence, love can still find its way back. Redemption is real, but only for those willing to show up, stay present, and fight for what truly matters. Family isn't always perfect, but it's worth rebuilding, piece by piece, even when the odds seem stacked against it. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. It means so much to have you here, part of this growing community of listeners who still believe in the power of storytelling. And if this story moved you, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another episode. I've got more powerful stories just like this coming your way. See you in the next one. He built an empire, but one rainy afternoon, a pair of little boys shattered everything he thought he knew, with eyes that looked just like his. What happens when a billionaire discovers the family he never knew he had and must choose between power and love? This story will grip your heart and leave you breathless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories that remind us what truly matters. The rain came down in sheets that afternoon, soaking the cobblestone sidewalks of Boston and painting the glassy cityscape in shades of gray and silver. Nathan Grant, 41 years old and CEO of one of the most powerful tech empires in the country, stepped out from the revolving doors of the Langston Hotel. His navy blue suit was sharp, his shoulders squared with practiced confidence, and a sleek black umbrella shielded him from the worst of the weather. A black SUV waited at the curb, his driver already stepping out to open the door. Nathan's mind was elsewhere. Investor reports, merger deadlines, board meetings stacked for the next 10 days. His phone buzzed in his coat pocket, but he ignored it. Another deal, another zero. What else was new? As he lifted one foot toward the car, something stopped him cold. Just across the street, near a dripping bus stop, stood a woman struggling to hail a ride. She was juggling two soaked backpacks while holding the hands of two little boys, maybe 6 years old. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her coat was soaked through, and her eyes darted between traffic and her malfunctioning phone. The twins huddled close to her legs, their tiny faces pinched with discomfort and cold. Nathan squinted. A flicker of recognition danced in the corner of his mind. There was something familiar about her, the way she moved, the slope of her shoulders, the shape of her jaw. And then she turned her face just enough for the light to catch her profile. His heart stopped. Julia Hayes. He hadn't seen her in nearly 7 years. She'd vanished from his life without warning, without a goodbye, without a trace. And yet, there she was. Same quiet beauty, same sharp green eyes that once saw through every polished mask he wore. Her hair was shorter now, and there were faint lines at the corners of her mouth, like the memory of too many nights spent worrying in silence. But it was her, and it wasn't just her. Nathan's breath caught in his throat as he looked down at the boys. Both had thick brown hair that curled at the edges, round cheeks and eyes, his eyes. The same deep hazel with golden flecks, unmistakable. It was like looking into a mirror, twice. He stumbled a step backward, umbrella nearly slipping from his grip. It can't be, he whispered to himself, frozen at the curb. The rain was forgotten. His driver called his name from behind, but Nathan barely heard it. His world had narrowed to 3 figures across the street. Without thinking, he moved forward, weaving through traffic, cars honking as he splashed through puddles. Julia hadn't seen him yet. She was too busy trying to wrangle the boys and open the Uber app on her screen. But then, his voice, soft and hoarse, cut through the rain. Julia? She looked up sharply. For a moment, her entire body went still. Their eyes met. He saw her lips part, her breath catch, the color drained from her face. Nathan, she whispered. One of the boys tugged on her coat. Mommy, who's that man? Nathan's steps slowed as he approached. His heart was hammering in his chest, louder than the rain. She looked like she wanted to run, but her feet stayed rooted to the sidewalk. He looked down at the boys again, now standing in front of her like tiny guards. One was slightly taller, a bit more serious. The other grinned up at him with a crooked smile and a mischievous glint. Both of them carried some invisible tether that pulled directly at his chest. Julia, he said again, softer this time. Are they? Her mouth tightened. She looked away, blinking rapidly, holding the boy's hands tighter. She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The answer was written all over their faces. Nathan couldn't breathe. In his world of numbers, data, and calculated risks, nothing had ever hit him as hard as that moment. He had missed something monumental, something real. While he was chasing empires, building billion-dollar deals, living in penthouses and flying private jets, 2 lives had been quietly growing up somewhere without him. I was just trying to get home, Julia said finally, her voice low and trembling, barely audible over the rain. Nathan dropped his gaze again to the boys. What's your name? He asked gently, kneeling down to their level. The taller one blinked, uncertain. "Noah," he said. The other piped up, "I'm Lucas." Nathan stood slowly, his throat tightened around their names. Noah and Lucas, 6 years old. He turned back to Julia, who was already pulling her coat tighter. "Julia?" His voice cracked. "Are they mine?" Julia looked up at him, eyes filled with a quiet sadness. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. In that silence, Nathan knew, and for the first time in his life, standing on that rain-slick sidewalk in front of the only truth that ever mattered, Nathan Grant, the man who had everything, realized just how much he'd lost. Julia agreed to meet him, but only for 15 minutes. She made that clear over the phone. No expectations, no drama, just a conversation. Nathan didn't argue. He didn't dare. The truth had already cracked something inside him, and he knew better than to push. They met at a quiet cafe tucked away on the south end of Boston Common, where the rain had finally let up, leaving the city damp and glistening. Julia arrived alone, her coat still slightly damp at the edges, her eyes guarded. Nathan was already there, seated by the window with 2 coffees on the table. He stood as she approached, but she didn't smile. She just sat, arms crossed, eyes wary. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. She nodded once. "You said you wanted to talk." Nathan studied her face. Even now, after all these years, she was still the only person who made him feel like he had something to prove. Not to the world, to her. "I didn't know," he started. "Not until I saw them. Julia, why didn't you tell me?" Her jaw tightened. She glanced at the window, at the dripping trees beyond it. "I wanted to, at first, then I didn't. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He leaned forward, fingers laced tightly together. "Julia, they're mine, aren't they?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if bracing herself. "Yes." The word hit him like a punch, even though he already knew. It was the final nail sealing 6 years of silence and absence and loss. "When did you find out?" 2 weeks after I left you," she said, voice calm but flat. "I just moved upstate for the counseling job. I was unpacking boxes when I felt sick, took a test, then another, then went to a clinic just to be sure." Nathan swallowed hard. "Why not call me? Why not tell me then?" Her eyes flicked back to his, sharp and unflinching. "Because I knew what your answer would be. You didn't give me the chance." "I gave you every chance, Nathan. Every single one." Her voice rose just a little, trembling with something deeper than anger. "You were building your company, chasing funding, sleeping 3 hours a night. I begged you to slow down. I asked you to come with me. I told you I wanted more than a maybe someday." He didn't speak. He remembered that night with brutal clarity, her holding that letter, her dream job offer. Him barely looking up from his laptop. "What about us?" she had asked. He hadn't answered. "Not really. I left because I needed something real," she said. "And when I found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe I'd call you. But then I pictured it. You trying to be a dad between board meetings and product launches, kids raised by nannies while the press swarmed our doorstep. I didn't want that life for them. I wouldn't have let that happen." She gave him a look that said otherwise. "You don't get it," she said softly. "It wasn't just about you being busy. It was about the way you looked right through me, like I was just an afterthought, something you'd come back to when the dust settled, but I couldn't wait for a version of you that might never exist." Nathan rubbed his face, shame burning in his chest. "I was wrong. About all of it." "Yeah," she said, "you were." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the city moved on, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying by with coffee cups and umbrellas. Inside, the quiet between them stretched thin. Finally, he said, "What are their full names?" She hesitated. "Noah Grant Hayes." Lucas Grant Hayes. His throat tightened. She'd given them his name, even when she hadn't told him. "I want to be part of their lives," he said, voice steadier now. "Whatever that looks like, I want to know them." Julia studied him again, as if searching for a crack in his resolve. "They don't know who you are. They've never asked, until yesterday." "Then let me explain it to them." "I don't know if I can trust you with that." "I'll earn it." She looked down at her hands. Her fingers twisted around each other. "If you really want to do this, then we need clarity first." He furrowed his brow. "Clarity?" "A DNA test," she said. "I know it sounds cold, but you need to be sure. And I need to be sure you're not doing this out of guilt or impulse." Nathan nodded slowly. "Okay, whatever you need." She stood to leave, pulling her coat tight. We'll set it up next week. Until then, don't try to see them again. Julia, not yet, she said firmly. This doesn't get fixed overnight. You're not just walking back into our lives like nothing happened. He stood too. I know. She started for the door, then paused and looked back. Nathan? Yeah? If this is just about making yourself feel better, don't bother. They're not a project. They're little boys with real hearts. Don't hurt them just because yours is finally starting to work. And with that, she walked out, leaving him in the quiet hum of the cafe, alone with the ghosts of all the choices he never realized he'd made. The envelope sat untouched on Nathan's desk for nearly 20 minutes. He'd canceled every meeting that day, turned off his phone, and drawn the blinds in his corner office overlooking downtown Boston. The room was silent, save for the soft ticking of a vintage clock on the wall. His fingers hovered above the envelope, trembling slightly. Inside was the answer he already knew in his heart, but his mind needed proof. Julia had agreed to the DNA test with a steady voice, but her eyes had said everything. I'm doing this for them. Don't make me regret it. The test itself had been quick, 2 cheek swabs and a nurse with a clipboard, but the waiting had nearly broken him. Finally, Nathan slid his finger beneath the seal, tore it open, and unfolded the paper. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. His breath caught. He read it again, then again. He leaned back in his chair, his hands suddenly weak, his vision blurring. Noah and Lucas were his sons, his blood, his legacy, his boys. He whispered their names aloud, as if speaking them would somehow make up for the 6 years he hadn't known them. It didn't. The weight of what he'd missed collapsed on him all at once. First words, first steps, scraped knees, bedtime stories, birthdays, sick nights, whispered questions about stars and monsters. He hadn't been there for any of it. Not one hug, not one smile. He picked up his phone, heart hammering, and called Julia. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail, voice rough with emotion. Julia, I got the results. You were right. They're mine. I'm sorry I doubted you. I was scared. I still am. But I want to be their father, and maybe one day you can forgive me. He hung up, dropped the phone, and stared at the paper again. Billion-dollar deals never made his hands shake like this, but this was everything. 3 days later, Julia texted. Just a time and a place. Saturday, noon, Mill Creek Park. He arrived early. No driver, no suit. Just jeans, a gray sweater, and a nervous heart beating so loud he swore the trees could hear it. He waited on a bench near the swings, scanning every family that passed. Then, he saw them. Julia walked toward him in a light jacket, hair pulled back. The boys ran ahead of her, laughing as they made a beeline for the sandbox. His throat tightened the second he saw them. They moved like him, smiled like him. There was no doubt anymore. Julia approached slowly. They don't know who you are, not really. I'm not here to overwhelm them, he said quietly. I just want to be near them. Start small. She gave him a cautious look, then nodded once and gestured to the sandbox. Go on then. Nathan took a deep breath, then knelt beside the boys. Hey there, he said, offering a soft smile. You guys building something cool? Lucas looked up first, eyes wide. We're making a volcano. It's gonna explode. Nathan chuckled. A volcano? That sounds dangerous. You got lava in there? No, Noah said seriously. But we got leaves. They're the lava. Creative, Nathan said, settling onto the edge of the sandbox. Mind if I help? Lucas shrugged. Only if you're good at making craters. I can try. For the next half hour, they built what was undoubtedly the most leaf-covered volcano in the park. Nathan let them bury his phone in the sand, helped them dig tunnels, even got leaves in his hair. He forgot about everything else. He wasn't a CEO today. He was just a man kneeling in the dirt, trying to memorize the sound of his sons laughing. Julia sat on a nearby bench watching, arms crossed but not cold. Just cautious, protective. Eventually, the boys plopped down on the grass, cheeks flushed and legs stretched out. Nathan sat with them, wiping his hands on his jeans. Lucas tilted his head. Do you have kids? Nathan hesitated, then smiled softly. Yeah, I have 2. Noah looked confused. Where are they? They're sitting right in front of me. The boys blinked. Then Noah's brow furrowed. Are you our dad? The words hit like a freight train. Nathan nodded, voice barely a whisper. Yes, I am. Lucas looked over at his brother, then back at Nathan. Where were you? Nathan didn't lie. I didn't know about you, but now I do, and I want to be here, if that's okay with you. They were quiet, Noah picked up a stick and poked the edge of their volcano. Lucas twirled a blade of grass. Then, out of nowhere, Noah said, "We have a soccer game next Saturday. You can come if you want." Nathan blinked. "Really? I'd love to," Lucas added, "and maybe you can help us learn how to tie ties." Nathan laughed, a warm, honest sound that felt like it came from somewhere deep in his chest. "Absolutely. Deal." Julia stood up, walked over slowly, her expression unreadable. "They like you," she said softly. "I like them more than I ever thought possible," he replied. And in that quiet, golden hour by the sandbox, something shifted. A beginning. A chance. A whisper of something sacred forming between broken pieces. Nathan didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in his life, he knew what truly mattered. It started with a headline. "Billionaire Nathan Grant spotted at Boston Park with mystery twins. Are they his?" At first, it was just a rumor on a gossip blog. Then came the photos. Grainy shots of Nathan crouching in the sandbox, helping two little boys build a volcano, Julia watching nearby. Within hours, it had exploded across the internet. News tickers scrolled the story alongside market updates. Talk shows speculated. Tabloids created wild theories. And just like that, Julia's quiet life imploded. By the next morning, there were reporters outside her apartment. A black SUV followed her to work. A man with a long lens camera tried to take photos through the preschool fence while Noah and Lucas played on the swings. One night, someone banged on her front door and shouted Nathan's name. She called him, her voice shaking. "This has to stop." "I didn't leak anything," he said, stunned. "I swear." "I know," she replied. "But this is your world, Nathan, and now it's mine. I told you what would happen." Nathan was already pacing his office, phone pressed to his ear. "I'll call lawyers. I'll have them arrested. I'll sue the networks. I'll buy the damn building they're hiding in." "No," she cut in. "You don't get it. This is the problem. You think everything can be controlled, bought, fixed." "I'm trying to protect you," he said, frustrated. She was quiet for a beat. "I didn't ask for protection. I asked for peace." That stopped him cold. He sat on the edge of his desk and closed his eyes, running a hand down his face. "What do you want me to do?" "I'm moving," she said softly. He sat upright. "Wait, what?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere they can be kids again. I can't have them grow up with cameras in their faces. I can't have them afraid every time someone shouts my name in public." Nathan was silent. Every part of him rebelled against the thought, her leaving, taking the boys, slipping away again like she did before. But this time was different. Now he knew what he was losing. "I'll come with you," he said suddenly. Julia didn't respond. "I mean it," he said again, firmer. "Not as the CEO, not as the guy on magazine covers, just as their dad, as someone who's tired of the noise." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You'd leave everything behind?" "I already missed 6 years. I won't miss another day." The line went quiet. Julia's heart was pounding in her chest. She looked at the sleeping boys in their room, their faces peaceful in the dim glow of a nightlight. Could she believe him? Could she trust that the man who once chose ambition over love was truly ready to live a different life? "You'd leave your company?" she asked carefully. "The penthouse, the jets, the investors. I'd trade it all for a backyard and bedtime stories," he said. "And I wouldn't look back." She sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "That world, it's all you've ever known." "Not anymore," he whispered. "That world didn't wipe tears or hold tiny hands. It didn't paint volcanoes or ask me to come to a soccer game. It didn't heal anything. But they do." There was a long silence. Then finally, Julia asked the question she'd been holding back since that first day in the rain. "What about us?" Nathan closed his eyes, exhaled deeply. "I want to try. Not from where we left off. From where we are now. Slowly. Honestly, if you'll let me." Tears burned behind her eyes. "It has to be real, Nathan. No promises you can't keep. No big gestures to make it all okay." "I wouldn't want it any other way," he said, and for the first time in years, she believed him. Weeks passed in a blur. Nathan handed in his resignation. The business world reeled. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire walks away from empire." Board members begged him to reconsider. Journalists called it a midlife crisis, but Nathan didn't care. He sold the penthouse. He declined every interview. He quietly packed his life into a few boxes, rented a modest moving truck, and drove north. To a sleepy coastal town with no paparazzi, no screaming headlines, no ringing phones. Just narrow streets lined with maple trees, front porches with squeaky swings, and the faint scent of the ocean. He bought a small house with chipped white paint and a backyard big enough for a soccer net. The kind of place where kids left their bikes in the driveway and neighbors brought over casseroles without asking. And on the first night there, after the boys had gone to bed and the house had gone quiet, Nathan stood on the porch with Julia beside him, listening to the waves in the distance. "You really gave it all up," she said, not as a question, but as a quiet marvel. He looked at her, eyes full of something deeper than regret, full of peace. "No," he said softly. "I finally found everything I was looking for." And for once, it wasn't in a boardroom or a quarterly report. It was right here, under the stars, behind the screen door, where two small boys were dreaming, and beside the woman who once believed in him before anyone else did. It took time. The quiet mornings, the messy breakfasts, the bedtime stories read in soft, uneven voices. It didn't all come at once, but slowly, like the tide creeping into the shore, life began to reshape itself around something real. Nathan Grant, once the face of modern innovation and business ambition, now found himself waking not to conference calls or international alarms, but to the sound of small feet racing down the hallway. Most mornings he was already in the kitchen before they arrived. Pancake batter on the counter, coffee brewing, bacon sizzling. Noah liked his pancakes stacked. Lucas wanted his shaped like dinosaurs. He'd learned that the hard way on a Monday morning when a round pancake sparked a meltdown. But he adjusted. He adjusted to everything, the chaos, the noise, the endless questions. He learned which backpack belonged to whom. He learned that Lucas hated raisins, and Noah couldn't sleep without a nightlight shaped like a rocket. He learned how to braid Julia's hair when she was too tired to do it herself, though she often redid it with a smile. The town welcomed them with that kind of small-town warmth that expected nothing and offered everything. No one cared about who Nathan used to be. At the local grocery store, he was just the tall guy who always forgot his loyalty card. At soccer practice, he was just Coach Nate, the volunteer who didn't know the offside rule but brought orange slices and cheered the loudest. On Saturdays, they had rituals. Morning cartoons, walks by the pier, ice cream even when it was too cold, and every evening ended the same way. Two boys curled up on the couch, one on each side of him, their heads on his shoulders, voices sleepy, stories unfinished. Julia watched it all unfold, careful at first, waiting for him to slip back into the man he used to be, the man who once prioritized meetings over moments. But he never did. Day by day, he proved that he wasn't just visiting this life. He was building it. Their relationship, too, unfolded slowly, like a song played on an old record, gentle, nostalgic, a little scratchy but honest. They didn't rush anything. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, just little things. A shared look over dinner, fingers brushing in the hallway, laughter that felt easy again. One evening after the boys had gone to bed and the house had fallen into that peaceful hush that only comes when children sleep, they sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in an old blanket. The stars stretched endlessly above them, and the ocean hummed quietly in the distance. "You don't miss it?" Julia asked, resting her head against his shoulder. "The boardrooms? The deals?" Nathan smiled, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "They never looked at me the way Noah does when I show up to his game, or the way Lucas grins when I help him with his art project." She chuckled softly. "You're not bad with finger paints." "I've improved," he said, chuckling too. "You should have seen the first attempt. The dog looked like a potato." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I think he was a potato." He leaned down, kissed her forehead. "Then I nailed it." That night, she didn't pull away when he reached for her hand. And when they sat in silence, it wasn't heavy anymore. It was full. A year passed. Seasons turned. Trees blossomed and shed. Bikes got bigger. Tooth fairies came and went. Nathan still worked, part-time, remote, and only during school hours. He offered his expertise now and then, invested quietly in meaningful causes, but never once did he miss the man he had been. Then came the real test. One fall afternoon, while cheering on Noah's soccer game and trying to keep Lucas from painting the neighbor's dog, someone snapped a photo. The story surfaced again. The past tried to knock on the door. But this time it didn't matter. Nathan didn't run to a publicist or issue a statement. He didn't care about whispers or headlines. He simply picked up the boys, took them home, made grilled cheese, and watched The Incredibles with them on the couch. He was no longer Nathan Grant the mogul. He was just Dad. And that, to him, was everything. One evening, as they decorated a tiny Christmas tree with handmade ornaments and popcorn garlands, Lucas suddenly looked up and asked, "Daddy, are you going to stay forever?" Nathan crouched, met his eyes, and said without hesitation, "Forever and a day." Julia turned from the kitchen, eyes glossy but smiling. The truth was, he didn't rewrite his legacy. He simply found the part of his story that had been missing: love. Not the kind that glittered under cameras or impressed investors, but the kind that held small hands in the dark, showed up every single day, and chose people over power. And in that warm little house by the sea, surrounded by laughter and late-night snacks and sticky fingers, Nathan finally became the man he always hoped he could be. Not a headline, not a brand, just a father, a partner, a man who chose love and never looked back. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this heartfelt story. We hope it touched your heart the way it touched ours. If there's one thing this journey reminds us, it's that it's never too late to do the right thing. No matter how much time has passed or how many mistakes we've made, love, real, honest love, has the power to rebuild what was broken. Nathan's story isn't just about second chances. It's about choosing what truly matters over what only looks like success. So wherever you are watching from, whether it's a quiet town, a big city, or somewhere in between, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you believe in stories that speak to the soul, stories about redemption, love, and real human connection, make sure to subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss the next one, because sometimes the stories we need the most are the ones that remind us we're never alone.